The Cincinnati Scenic Railway. CSR is well known for their operations of the Lebanon Mason and Monroe Railroad in Lebanon, Ohio, and the Ohio Rail Experience running across western Ohio. Back in late August of 2020, CSR started the Save the Chessie campaign. This campaign was started to save Ex Chessie System / Baltimore and Ohio 6955 and EMD GP30 from getting scrapped. Stage 1 of the campaign was to raise $35,000 by October 31st, 2020 in order to purchase 6955 from its owner, National Railway Equipment, and luckily they were able to reach their goal before the deadline and secure the purchase of 6955 from NRE. Now, Stage 2 has begun. The second stage of the campaign is to raise $20,000 to help with the move of 6955. The engine is located at NRE's Silvis, Illinois facility in Silvis, Illinois, and CSR wants to move the engine to their facility in Lebanon, Ohio, just north of Cincinnati, Ohio, for restoration. Unfortunately, 6955 has a failed turbocharger and can't run under its own power as of now. But CSR is capable of fixing that and will be able to restore the locomotive back into operational condition. As of now, CSR has a Charity.GoFundMe set up to raise the $20,000 for the move, and it's currently at $3,200 as of the making of this video. So, if you wish to help 6955 on its road to restoration, please go to the Charity.GoFundMe and donate there. You can donate as little as $10 or as much as $500 or more to the campaign, whatever you feel is necessary. Once the goal is reached, 6955 will be moved to Lebanon, Ohio, and restored back to its Chessie system glory. So, if you wish to help, the link to the Charity.GoFundMe will be down in the description box down below, so you can go check that out. CSR also has a Save the Chessie website and Facebook page set up as well. There, you can be notified about any updates or on what's going on with the campaign there as well. Links to the website and the Facebook page will be also linked down below as well, so you guys can go check that out. Hopefully, once the campaign is finished, we'll be able to see the Chessie Cat return to the main line once again. It's the morning of September 5th, 2020. On this day, my dad, brother, and I were driving down towards Kenova, West Virginia. While we were driving down there, we came across a northbound CSX freight train on the northern sub in Chillicothe, Ohio. So we caught it at the Road 207 overpass just north of Chillicothe, Ohio. Our plan was to drive down to Kenova and decide whether to follow the old Norfolk and Western Railroad to Williamson, West Virginia, or to follow the old Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad to Thurmond, West Virginia. After the CSX train got by, we then got back on the road and later found ourselves at the usual rail fanning spot in Kenova, West Virginia. Although this place is well known as a hotspot by rail fans, the day we visited, there seemed to be a lack of traffic on both roads. As we were looking around, we then saw what appeared to be Ex Norfolk Southern locomotives sitting next to the CSX main line. So we drove down there to investigate, and it turned out to be a line of 4 EMD SD70Ms, Ex Norfolk Southern 2596, 2604, 2644, and 2631. 2596 was built in 2003, and the rest were built in 2004 as part of the last batch of EMD SD70Ms to Norfolk Southern, before EMD stopped producing them and switched to producing the EMD SD70M-2. Although we are next to the CSX main line, the tracks these SD70Ms are on are Norfolk Southern's, as this line is used by them to connect with the Canal River Terminal Railroad just east of here. These engines could produce 4,000 horsepower and handled any of NS's mainline trains across their system. Sadly, in early 2020, Norfolk Southern retired the SD70Ms from their railroad and sold them to Progress Rail. At the time of our visit, these SD70Ms were being stored here, awaiting their fate to either be sold to another railroad or more likely to be scrapped. Seems like history is repeating itself. Just like back in the day, when the once mightiest of steam locomotives were being retired and scrapped in favor of diesel locomotives in the 1950s, now many of these once mighty SD70Ms and even GE's -9 40CWs are being retired and scrapped in favor of much more powerful and efficient locomotives, such as the EMD SD70ACE-T4 and the GE ET44C4. We'll now turn back the clock to see some of these SD70Ms back in their heyday. We first go back to February 26, 2016, relocating to the old Duval Road railroad crossing south of Lockbourne, Ohio. On this day, I was out here to see the Monongahela Heritage Unit, but while I was out here, I was able to capture a couple of SD70Ms leading some trains through here. The first one we see here is NS 2641, as it leads a southbound coal train through here. Later on in the day, I would end up catching another one of these SD70Ms in the lead. The next one we see is NS 2615, as it leads a freight train northbound. We'll now go back to November 21st, 2015. On this day, my dad, brother, and I were out here to see Illinois Central 1025, a Death Star locomotive. But while we were out here, we also saw Norfolk Southern 2604 on a freight train. We first see IC 1025 as it heads north on a power move. After the power move, we then saw Norfolk Southern 2604 on the southbound freight train. We'll leave the past for now and head back to September 5th, 2020. While we are looking at the SD70M deadline, we then noticed a signal on the CSX main line turn green. We then noticed a pair of headlights in the distance and got set up to catch the train. This would prove to be our most interesting catch of the day, as in the lead was CSX 4411 and EMD GP40-2. There are also 2 GE AC44CWs, 2 GE ES44AC-H's, and 1 EMD SD70 Mac. Unlike Norfolk Southern, CSX still runs their fleet of SD70s. As a side note, CSX 4411 was built in 1977 for Conrail as their 3303. Unfortunately, this ended up being our last train for the rest of the day, as we were unable to find any other trains where we went. As I said earlier, our plan was to get down here and decide on which way we wanted to go, to either follow the old C&O or the old N&W. In the end, I decided that we should follow the old C&O railway line. I always wanted to explore this line, and I figured now would be a good time to do it. So we got in the car and started heading east along the old C&O. The first place we found ourselves at was the Collis P. Huntington Railroad Historical Society Museum, also known as the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad Museum. This museum is home to a small collection of railroad rolling stock and displays. The pride of this place is Chesapeake and Ohio 1308, a massive H6 2662 articulated. 1308 was built in 1949 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works, and despite its appearance, is a modern locomotive, having roller bearings, mechanical lubricators, a stoker, and superheaters. This engine was part of the last batch of a series of 2662s dating back all the way to 1911. The engine's purpose on the C&O was to haul coal from the coal mines in the new River Gorge and take them to Hinton, West Virginia, where the coal cars loaded with coal would be sorted on the more long-distance coal trains. The engine stayed on the C&O hauling trains until February 29, 1956, when it hauled its last train and was retired by the railroad. In 1959, the C&O then donated 1308 to the Collis P. Huntington Railroad Historical Society, and in 1962 was moved to its present location, and it's been here ever since. Besides 1308, its sister engine, 1309, also still exists, and is in a state of restoration at the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad in Ridgely, West Virginia, across the river from Cumberland, Maryland. Unfortunately, at the time of our visit, the museum was closed for the day, so we couldn't get in. Their usual open hours are Sundays from 1 to 4 p.m., and they are located at the corner of Memorial Boulevard and West 14th Street in Huntington, West Virginia. We'll definitely try to get back down here when they're open to pay them a visit. After visiting the museum, we then drove into downtown Huntington, where we found the Collis P. Huntington Railroad Historical Society South Yard. This is where the society stores its small fleet of passenger cars it owns, and is usually not opened to the public. Sitting in the yard was New York Central 38 and PRR 800854, the Braddock Inn. The last time we saw 38 was when it was on the CSX 76 Santa train back in 2018. Also sitting in the yard was Marshall University 1837 Thundering Herd. 1837 was built in 1980 as a GE C30-7 for the Louisville and Nashville Railroad as their 7067. Sadly, in 2000, 7067 was turned into a yard slug and was renumbered to 1837 and given its Marshall University paint scheme. Essentially, it's now just a shell of a C30-7. After doing some more exploring of Huntington, we then continued down the old C&O main line. Eventually, we found ourselves at the old C&O Amtrak depot in Charleston, West Virginia. Amtrak's Cardinal usually stops here to pick up and drop off passengers. Also, at the time of our visit, Amtrak was renovating the waiting room inside the depot. Unfortunately, yet again, we didn't see any train action here. But let's go back in time to when we did see some train action here. We'll now go back to July 14th, 2015. On this day, my dad, brother, and I were returning home after chasing Norfolk and Western 611 the previous day. As we were driving home, we ended up at the Charleston depot that afternoon, where we caught a westbound CSX intermodal train passing by the depot. Leading this intermodal train was CSX 477, a GE AC44CW built in 2000, and right behind 477 was CSX 8751, an EMD SD60I. 8751 was built in 1995 for Conrail as 5645. After shooting it here in 2017, 8751 was retired from CSX. It was then sold to LTEX and later in early 2020 was sold again to its current owner, the Buffalo and Pittsburgh Railroad, a Genesee and Wyoming owned company. Unfortunately, as I was filming the train, my camera ran out of power, so I had to switch to my old photographer's camera to finish filming it. Back in the present, after stopping in Charleston, we then continued down to Montgomery, West Virginia. Here, we stopped at the Amtrak depot to see if there are any trains coming. Sometime in 2020, the platform here was rebuilt to make it more accessible to passengers riding the Cardinal. Again, there were no trains coming, so let's go back in time again to May 26, 2017. On this day, my dad, brother, and I were traveling to Roanoke, Virginia to see NNW 611 again. On our way down there, we ended up stopping at the Montgomery depot. Back in 2017, the old platform used by the old C&O station was still in use here by Amtrak's Cardinal. As we were looking around at the station, we then noticed a green signal on the main line, and after a bit of time, a westbound CSX coal train then came by the station. After our stop here back in the present, we then continued down the New River line to our final stop that afternoon, Thurmond, West Virginia. This town was incorporated in 1900, but the rails of the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad reached here sometime in the early 1870s. By 1910, not only was Thurmond the biggest railroad center on the C&O, but it was also a big area for the shipment of coal in and out of the New River Gorge region. Not only was this town home to the iconic Thurmond Depot, but it was also home to a large yard, a turntable, and even an engine shop to repair the C&O's fleet of steam locomotives. There is even a possibility that C&O 1308 might have been worked on here at one time. Thurmond was also an important watering and coaling stop for the big steam engines as they went back and forth through the town. Sadly, by the 1930s, the town's importance began to wane as nearby coal mines began to close down, as coal began to dry up in the area. But thanks to Thurmond being an important stop on the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad, the town endured. Again, just like in Charleston and Montgomery, we were unable to see any trains come through the iconic town that day. So let's go back in time again to when we did. We'll now return back to May 26, 2017. After catching the coal train in Montgomery, we arrived in Thurmond. While we were here, we were able to go inside the old Thurmond Depot and explore it. As we were exploring it, two CSX work trucks then drove into town and got onto the main line. We got to watch as they left town heading east.
Shove under there. That's why I'm here. That's why my kids know about it. My great-grandpa
About 30 minutes after the CSX trucks got down the line, a CSX coal train then pulled into town. Thurmond is not known for being a crew change point for CSX, but on this day, the crew of this coal train seemed to have ran out of time to run the train. Luckily, CSX was prepared for this as another crew arrived here not long after the coal train came to a stop. Once the crews were switched, the coal train then continued on its eastward journey down the gorge. On this train was CSX 449, 2478, and 209. 449 and 209 are both GE AC-44CWs, 449 being built in 2000 and 209 being built in 1996. 2478 is an EMD SD50-2, built in 1983, originally for Conrail, as their 6709. Getting back to the history of Thurmond, unfortunately by the late 1950s, the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad then switched from using steam locomotives to using diesel locomotives, and that truly began the downfall of Thurmond. Since diesels could go much longer distances than the steam engines, the refueling stop here was no longer needed for the C&O. Despite this, some diesels called Thurmond home, as the branch lines here were still carrying coal out of the mountains. The engine house here was converted to the maintenancing and servicing of diesels and continued to do so until that operation was shut down in the late 1970s. The engine house was still in use by the car department, where they used it to inspect and repair rolling stock until 1985, when the engine house's new owner, CSX, completely shut down the facility, and by the 1990s, it was gone. Also, between the 1960s and 1980s, many people moved out of Thurmond, almost turning the once mighty railroad town into a ghost town. By the 1990s, all that was left of Thurmond was the depot, the coaling tower, the Macon Cox and Goodman Kincaid buildings, the National Bank of Thurmond, which all three of these buildings were shut down by this point, and a handful of residents. Luckily, in 1978, the new River Gorge National River Park was created and now owns most of the town of Thurmond. In 1995, the Thurmond Depot was renovated and today is now used as a Park Service Visitor Center, and the entire town is now designated as a historic district on the National Register of Historic Places. After the coal train got by, we'll now leave 2017 and go back to June 12th, 2015. On this day, my dad, brother, and I were on our way to Virginia again for 6/11. On our way there, we stopped in Thurmond and caught a westbound CSX ethanol train as it passed the historic depot. Another interesting note is that Amtrak's Cardinal still services Thurmond, but only as a flag stop. A flag stop, using the town of Thurmond as an example, is when a passenger, or let's say on the Cardinal, tells the conductor of the train that they would like to get off at Thurmond. The train will come to a stop here and let the passenger off the Cardinal here. Otherwise, if no one wishes to get off at Thurmond, the Cardinal will just pass by the station without stopping, continuing on its journey. Thurmond is the last flag stop outside of the state of Alaska, as the Alaska Railroad's Hurricane Turn still makes 6 flag stops on its journey from Anchorage, Alaska to Fairbanks, Alaska. And with this train's passing, we'll now return back to the present of September 5th, 2020. After our stop in Thurmond, we then began our drive home, but on our way there, we stopped at the Hawk's Nest Overlook just southwest of Anston, West Virginia. Here, you can get a fantastic view of not only the new River Gorge, but also the Hawk's Nest Dam and the old C&O main line through this part of the new River Gorge. Here, the railroad's double-tracked main line separates and uses both sides of the river. The main line does this until it reaches a place called Sewell, northeast of Thurmond, West Virginia, along the new river. There, the tracks come back together. Oh, what I would have given to see a CSX train roll through here now. Sadly, as much as I would have loved for that to happen, it never did. Oh well, maybe next time. Although this day proved to be not a very busy day for trains on this line, we still had a lot of fun just looking around and scouting out the line. Not only that, but we also had some fun going back in time to see old locomotives and trains through here. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun looking back through my vault and seeing what footage I had of this line. I'll be seeing you later, guys, and I hope you have a great day.